Captain Taejo Kim stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship *Resilience*, his eyes fixed on the main screen. The stars looked normal, but the sensors told a different story. Something big was coming. "Sir, we have multiple objects entering the solar system near Pluto's orbit," said Dojin, the young sensor officer. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. "How many?" asked Taejo. 20 large ships, sir, each one bigger than anything we have, and hundreds of smaller craft." Taejo nodded calmly. This was not unexpected. For 3 years, Earth had intercepted strange signals from this region of space. The United Earth Council had prepared as best they could, but no one really knew what was coming. "Send the alert to all Earth bases. Tell Luna Base to prepare for possible diplomatic contact, and get me Commander Park on the line." The communication screen flickered, and the face of Commander Hyun Park appeared. He was in the middle of combat training, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Captain Kim," Hyun said with a small bow of his head. "They're here, aren't they?" "Yes, near Pluto, moving slowly. I think they're being careful." Hyun wiped his face with a towel. The Garvik, just as the probes predicted. The Garvik were a mystery to humans. Earth's deep space probes had captured images of their ships destroying a small colony on a distant moon. The reptilian alien stood over 2 meters tall, with thick scaled skin and eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. "Ambassador Lee wants you at Luna Base," said Taejo. "You'll head security for the first contact meeting." Hyun frowned. "Ambassador Lee doesn't like me very much." "She doesn't need to like you. She needs you to keep her safe. The Council thinks the Garvik respect strength above all else. You're our strongest." "I'll leave within the hour," said Hyun. 2 days later, Hyun stood in the large meeting chamber of Luna Base. The room had been specially prepared with both human and alien comfort in mind. One side had standard chairs and a long table. The other side had wider platforms that intelligence suggested would suit the Garvik's larger forms. Ambassador Ju Lee paced nervously behind the human table. She was small, barely reaching Hyun's shoulder, but her presence filled the room. "Commander Park, I need to be very clear," she said. "This meeting is for peaceful first contact. We are not here to threaten or challenge them." Hyun nodded. "My team understands, Ambassador. We're here for protection only. Your reputation is not one of restraint." Hyun smiled slightly. "My reputation is exactly why the Council sent me." Before Ju could reply, the doors slid open. Dr. Minji Han rushed in, carrying a small device. "Ambassador, Commander," she said, slightly out of breath. "The Garvik shuttle has docked. But before they enter, you need these." She held up small nose filters. "What are these for?" asked Ju. "Our probes detected unusual chemical compounds in the air around Garvik ships," Minji explained. "I believe they use fear pheromones as a weapon. These filters should protect you." Hyun took one of the filters and examined it. "Will they know we're protected?" "No," said Minji. "The filters are nearly invisible once inserted." Ju looked concerned. "Is this ethical? Starting our first diplomatic meeting with deception?" "It's not deception," said Hyun. "It's preparation. If they're coming in with their natural weapons, we should have our defenses ready." The base alert system chimed softly. "The Garvik delegation has arrived at the outer door," announced the base A. "Places, everyone," said Ju. "And remember, we represent all of humanity today." The Garvik entered the room with a display of power. 6 guards in metallic armor flanked a taller figure wearing elaborate red and gold robes. Their scaled skin ranged from dark green to almost black, with ridges along their heads that resembled crowns. Hyun watched their movements carefully. They were predators, that much was clear from how they scanned the room, noting exits and positions of the human security team. The leader stepped forward. "I am High Commander Crag of the Garvik Imperium. We claim this system by right of discovery and strength." Ju stepped forward, bowing slightly. I am Ambassador Ju Li of Earth. We welcome you to our system, but I must correct you. This is our home. Humans have lived here for thousands of years. The Garvik leader's eyes narrowed. Hyun noticed a slight shimmer in the air around the aliens, the pheromones Minji had warned about. You show no fear, said Crag, confusion evident in his voice. All species fear the Garvik. Hyun stepped forward, positioning himself beside Ju. Humans experience fear differently, he said in a clear voice. Then, to everyone's surprise, he spoke several words in the rough, clicking language of the Garvik. The aliens visibly startled. Their head ridges flared. You speak our tongue? Asked Crag. Only a few words, said Hyun. We've been studying the transmissions from your ships. The Garvik guards shifted uneasily, hands moving closer to their weapons. Hyun noticed this, but remained calm. His own security team tensed, ready to move at his signal. Crag turned to one of his guards and spoke rapidly in their language. The guard replied, sounding agitated. Is there a problem? Asked Ju. Our methods do not seem to work as expected with your kind, said Crag. This is unusual. Minji, who stood near the back of the room monitoring atmospheric conditions, caught Hyun's eye and nodded slightly. The pheromone levels were rising dramatically. The Garvik were increasing their fear attack. Under normal circumstances, most beings would be trembling now, their minds clouded with terror, but the humans in the room remained composed, protected by the filters. Hyun decided to take a risk. He removed his nose filter discreetly, taking a deep breath of the pheromone-laden air. He felt the effect immediately, a cold wave of dread washing over him. But unlike other species, the human brain processed fear in a unique way. For Hyun, specially trained for combat situations, fear sharpened his senses. High Commander Crag, Hyun said, stepping closer to the tall alien. Your empire has conquered many worlds using fear as a weapon. But here's something you should understand about humans. He smiled, a gesture the Garvik didn't use or fully comprehend. What frightens others often makes us stronger. Crag's eyes widened as he observed Hyun. The human should be paralyzed with terror, yet he moved with increased confidence, his pupils dilated not in fear, but in focused alertness. What are you? Asked Crag. I am Commander Hyun Park of Earth's Special Defense Forces, and I'm just one of millions like me. Humans don't run from fear, we run toward it. The Garvik delegation conferred among themselves in rapid, clicking speech. Finally, Crag turned back to face Ju and Hyun. Ambassador Lee, we did not expect to find a species with your unique qualities. This changes our approach. Ju glanced at Hyun, surprised by this turn. We are open to peaceful discussions about cooperation between our peoples. Perhaps, said Crag. But first, we must understand you better. The Garvik respect strength above all. Your Commander Park has shown unusual resistance to our natural abilities. Hyun felt the full effect of the fear pheromones now, his heart racing, adrenaline flooding his system. But his mind remained clear, clearer than usual, even. This was what made humans different, what had helped them survive on a planet filled with dangers. Fear didn't shut them down. It woke them up. I propose a test, said Crag, to establish mutual respect between our species. What kind of test? Asked Ju cautiously. Combat. Single combat between champions. This is the Garvik way of measuring worth. Ju began to protest, but Hyun spoke first. I accept. Commander Park. Ju turned to him in shock. You cannot make such decisions without. With respect, Ambassador, said Hyun, his eyes still fixed on Crag. This is exactly why I'm here. The council knew this might happen. He addressed Crag again. Name the terms. Crag seemed pleased. One warrior from each side. If you win, we will recognize Earth's sovereignty and discuss equal alliance. If our champion wins, your planet accepts Garvik protection and control. Agreed, said Hyun before Ju-woo could object. As the Garvik delegation left to make preparations, Ju-woo confronted Hyun. You may have just gambled Earth's future on a fight you cannot win. Hyun replaced his nose filter, the rush of the fear pheromones fading. They were always going to challenge us, Ambassador. This way, we only risk one life instead of millions. And if you lose? I won't, said Hyun with quiet confidence, because now I understand their weakness. The Garvik have never faced an enemy who isn't afraid of them. They don't know what to do when fear fails. Minji approached them, her medical scanner showing Hyun's elevated vitals. Your adrenaline levels are off the charts, she said. No signs of cognitive impairment. Remarkable. The Garvik thought they knew fear, said Hyun, looking toward the door where the aliens had exited. Now they'll learn what it means to face someone who turns fear into strength. The news of Commander Hyun Park's acceptance of the Garvik challenge spread quickly through Luna Base. Within hours, the United Earth Council called an emergency meeting. Ambassador Ju Lee stood before the digital screen showing the faces of Earth's leaders. Commander Park had no authority to accept this challenge, she said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. We should inform the Garvik that proper diplomatic channels must be followed. Captain Taejo Kim, who had rushed from his ship to Luna Base after hearing the news, stood up. With respect, Ambassador, the Garvik don't care about our diplomatic channels. They respect power and direct action. If we back out now, they'll see it as weakness. The council president, a stern woman with gray hair, leaned forward on her screen. Captain Kim is right. Our intelligence on the Garvik suggests that ritual combat is central to their culture. Refusing the challenge would be seen as surrendering our claim to Earth. Ju-woo shook her head. So we stake the future of humanity on a single fight. This is madness. Not madness, said a quiet voice from the back of the room. Strategy. Everyone turned to see Hyun standing in the doorway. He looked calm, his posture relaxed despite the pressure now resting on his shoulders. The Garvik conquered 17 systems before reaching us. Hyun continued, walking to the center of the room. In every case, they used the same approach, psychological warfare followed by overwhelming force. But they've never met humans before. And you think you can defeat their champion alone? Asked Ju-woo. Hyun smiled slightly. Not alone, no. I'll need help. The next day, Hyun stood in a large training room on Luna Base. The gravity was set to Earth normal, making his movements easier than they would be on Earth, but harder than in lunar gravity. Master Ji-hoon Song, Earth's foremost expert in adaptive combat, circled Hyun slowly. Despite being in his 60s, Ji-hoon moved with the grace of a much younger man. His face showed little emotion as he studied Hyun's stance. The Garvik are physically stronger than humans, said Ji-hoon. Their scales provide natural armor. Their reach is longer. Their jaws can crush bone. He stopped in front of Hyun. How will you win? Speed, flexibility, human endurance. Ji-hoon nodded. Good, but not enough. He suddenly struck at Hyun, his hand moving faster than seemed possible for his age. Hyun blocked, but barely. The Garvik fight to dominate, continued Ji-hoon. When they can't inspire fear, they become confused. Then angry. Anger makes them strong but sloppy. For the next 4 hours, Ji-hoon pushed Hyun through combat drills designed to exploit the weaknesses of a larger, stronger opponent. By the end, Hyun was drenched in sweat, his muscles burning with exhaustion. Again, said Ji-hoon. Hyun nodded and resumed his fighting stance. In a laboratory 2 levels below the training room, Dr. Minji Han worked frantically. Holographic displays showed detailed scans of Garvik anatomy, based on data collected during the meeting. Their nervous system is fascinating, she told Captain Taejo, who had come to check on her progress. The fear response is wired directly into their combat reflexes. It's like their entire evolution was built around fear as both weapon and warning system. Can you use that? Asked Taejo. Minji nodded, pushing a strand of hair from her face. I think so. The neural implant I've designed for Commander Park will do two things. First, it will block the worst effects of their fear pheromones. Second, it will redirect his own fear response to enhance his combat abilities. Is it safe? Minji hesitated. It's as safe as I can make it with the time we have. The human brain isn't designed to process that much adrenaline without cognitive impairment. There's a risk of heart failure if the stimulation gets too intense. Taizhou looked troubled. Does Hyun know this? Yes. He said the risk to one person is worth the safety of billions. Taizhou nodded slowly. That sounds like him. 3 days later, Hyun lay on an operating table while Minji carefully inserted the neural implant at the base of his skull. The procedure was delicate, requiring precision to the millimeter. How are you feeling? She asked as she worked. Calm, said Hyun. Focused. The Garvik announced their champion today, said Minji. His name translates roughly to Dreadbringer. He's won 73 ritual combats. Good, said Hyun. That means he's never lost. He won't know how to handle it. Minji's hands paused briefly. You're very confident for someone about to fight an alien twice his size. I'm not confident because I don't know fear, said Hyun. I'm confident because I do. Fear has been my teacher my whole life. Minji completed the procedure and helped Hyun sit up. The implant needs 12 hours to integrate with your nervous system. Then we'll test it. How will you test it? Minji smiled grimly. By scaring you half to death. The testing chamber was simple, a white room with observation windows. Hyun stood in the center, wearing only light training clothes. Captain Taizhou, Ambassador Juwu, and Dr. Minji watched from behind thick glass. The room is sealed, said Minji. I'm going to release a controlled dose of Garvik fear pheromones, synthesized from samples we collected after the meeting. Juwu looked concerned. Is this really necessary? Yes, said Taizhou. Hyun needs to know exactly how his body will respond before he faces the real thing. Minji pressed a button, and a fine mist sprayed into the chamber. Almost immediately, Hyun's body tensed. The monitors showed his heart rate jumping from 60 to 140 beats per minute in seconds. His amygdala is firing at maximum, reported Minji, watching the brain scans. But the implant is redirecting the signals. Wait, she frowned. His adrenaline levels are too high. The implant is working too well. Inside the chamber, Hyun had dropped to one knee. His hands were shaking, but his face showed intense concentration. Shut it down, said Juwu urgently. No, said Taizhou. Look at his eyes. Hyun was standing again. The monitors showed his vital signs stabilizing, though at heightened levels. His pupils were dilated, his muscles visibly tense, but he was moving with purpose. He began performing complex martial arts forms, his movements faster and more precise than normal. He's using it, said Minji in wonder. He's channeling the fear response into controlled action. A sudden alert sounded. Minji looked at her console in alarm. We have an intruder in the upper observation deck. Security cameras showed a Garvik, smaller than the ones they had met before, watching Hyun through the overhead window. The alien's eyes were wide with what appeared to be shock. It's a scout, said Taizhou. They're spying on Hyun's preparation. Should we stop the test? Asked Minji. No, said Taizhou. Let them watch. Let them see what they're facing. On the Garvik command ship orbiting Earth's moon, High Commander Cragg received the scout's report with growing concern. The human deliberately exposed himself to fear stimuli. He asked, his scaled brow ridges rising in disbelief. Yes, High Commander, clicked the scout. He appeared to grow stronger when afraid. His movements became faster, more precise. Cragg turned to his advisors. Is this possible? A species that uses fear as a weapon against itself. The chief scientist, a Garvik with paler scales indicating advanced age, shook his head. It defies all evolutionary logic, High Commander. Fear exists to prevent danger, not invite it. Yet we saw it, insisted the scout. The humans have some technology that redirects their fear response. And their champion, this Hyun Park, seems especially adapted to the process. Crag stared at the holographic image of Earth rotating slowly before him. 17 systems have fallen to us because all intelligent species share the same response to fear. If these humans are different, he didn't finish the thought. Our champion is still larger and stronger, said the military advisor. The combat will be in 3 days on their red planet. Dreadbringer has never lost. There's always a first time, said Crag quietly. Prepare contingency plans. If the human wins, we may need to reconsider our approach to this species. For the first time in his long career of conquest, High Commander Crag felt something unusual stirring in his cold blood. Doubt. The red dust of Mars swirled around the landing pads as ships from Earth and the Garvik fleet touched down. An old mining facility near Olympus Mons had been chosen as the battle site. The location was symbolic, neutral ground, yet close enough to Earth that humans felt some connection to it. Commander Hyun Park stood at the viewport of the Earth shuttle, looking at the desolate landscape. The huge volcano loomed in the distance, a silent witness to what would happen today. "Are you ready?" asked Captain Taejo, coming to stand beside him. "As ready as I'll ever be," said Hyun. He felt the small implant at the base of his skull, now fully integrated with his nervous system. During the past 3 days, he had trained ceaselessly with Master Ji-hoon, pushing his body to its limits while Dr. Minji monitored the implant's effects. Ambassador Ju approached them, her formal diplomatic uniform pristine despite the journey. "The Garvik have arrived with their champion. He is—" She hesitated. "Impressive." "How impressive?" asked Taejo. 3 meters tall, heavily armored scales, claws that could tear through metal. Hyun nodded calmly. "Just as we expected." Ju studied him closely. "You truly aren't afraid, are you?" "I am afraid," said Hyun. "But fear is just information. It tells me there's danger. What I do with that information is up to me." A soft chime indicated it was time to disembark. Hyun touched the small Earth emblem on his chest, a simple token of his home planet. Then he turned and walked toward the airlock. The arena had been set up in the main chamber of the mining facility. The high dome had once housed large machinery, but now it was empty except for a circular area marked with red lines. Oxygen generators hummed quietly, maintaining a breathable atmosphere. Spectators from both species gathered on raised platforms around the circle. The Garvik stood in rigid formations, their eyes fixed on the center. The humans, mostly military and diplomatic personnel, sat in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Dr. Minji made last-minute checks on Hyun's vital signs. "The implant is working perfectly," she said. "Your body is primed to convert fear responses into enhanced performance." She looked up at him, concern in her eyes. "But there's a limit, Hyun. If your heart rate goes above 200 beats per minute for more than 2 minutes, the strain could be fatal." "I understand," said Hyun. He was wearing simple combat fatigues, no armor, no weapons except a standard combat knife sheathed at his belt. The Garvik had agreed to allow 1 weapon each. Master Ji-hoon approached, his weathered face solemn. "Remember what I taught you," he said. "The Garvik fight to dominate. They expect submission when they display strength. Give them none." Hyun bowed deeply to his teacher. "Thank you, Master. I will remember." A loud horn sounded, signaling the start of the ceremony. High Commander Crag stepped into the center of the circle, his ornate armor gleaming under the artificial lights. "Today, by the ancient laws of combat, we determine the fate of the human world," announced Crag. His voice was amplified so all could hear. "If our champion wins, Earth accepts Garvik protection and guidance. If the human champion wins, we will recognize Earth's sovereignty and discuss alliance as equals." Ambassador Ju stood and spoke clearly. "Earth accepts these terms and puts its faith in Commander Hyun Park." Crag gestured, and a massive door on the Garvik side opened. The champion stepped through, and a murmur ran through the human spectators. Dreadbringer stood almost twice Hyun's height. His scales were dark green with black ridges, thicker than those of other Garvik they had seen. His arms ended in curved claws, and a massive tail swung behind him for balance. At his side hung a serrated blade as long as Hyun's entire arm. Captain Taejo leaned toward Dr. Minji. Can Hyun really defeat that? Minji's eyes were fixed on her medical monitor. The question isn't can he, it's at what cost. Hyun walked calmly to the center of the arena. Next to the towering Garvik, he looked small and fragile, but his posture was straight, his face composed. Crag looked between the two champions, then raised his hand. Combat begins at the sound of the horn. It ends with submission or death. He stepped back quickly. The horn sounded, a deep, resonating note that echoed through the chamber. Immediately, Dreadbringer released a concentrated blast of fear pheromones directly at Hyun. The potent chemicals were visible as a slight shimmer in the air. Hyun felt the impact like a physical blow. His heart rate jumped instantly from 70 to 150 beats per minute. His vision tunneled, and for a moment, his legs trembled. On Minji's monitor, warning lights flashed. The Garvik champion, seeing the human's reaction, let out a roaring sound and charged forward, blade raised high. But something unexpected happened. As the fear flooded Hyun's system, the neural implant redirected it. Instead of freezing, Hyun felt time seem to slow. He saw the Garvik's movements with crystal clarity. His muscles, flooded with adrenaline, responded with supernatural speed. Hyun dodged the first strike with millimeters to spare. The Garvik blade slammed into the ground where he had stood, cracking the hard surface. Before Dreadbringer could recover, Hyun darted inside his reach, slashing with his knife at the softer scales near the alien's joints. Green liquid seeped from the wound, not deep, but the first blood of the combat. The Garvik spectators fell completely silent. Dreadbringer roared in rage and spun with surprising speed, his tail whipping around toward Hyun. This time, Hyun couldn't dodge completely. The tail caught him in the side, sending him rolling across the arena. Cracked ribs, reported Minji tensely, watching her monitors. Heart rate at 170. Hyun rose to his feet, pain evident on his face, but he was smiling, a human expression the Garvik couldn't understand. To them, showing teeth was a threat, not a sign of pleasure. The Garvik champion hesitated, confused by this reaction. He released another wave of fear pheromones, even stronger than the first. Hyun's heart rate spiked to 185. Sweat poured down his face, but his smile grew wider. "What is happening?" demanded Crag from the sidelines. "He's using the fear," said Ambassador Juwoo, understanding dawning on her face. "It's making him stronger." The combat continued for 15 minutes, an eternity in such intense fighting. Dreadbringer had the advantage of size, strength, and natural armor. But Hyun moved like water, never where the Garvik expected, striking and retreating, targeting the same weak points with surgical precision. The turning point came 20 minutes into the battle. Hyun, dodging a powerful downward strike, slipped on a patch of his own blood. The Garvik's blade caught him across the chest, opening a long gash. Major laceration, called Minji. Heart rate 195 and climbing. Captain Taejo half rose from his seat, but Master Jihoon put a restraining hand on his arm. "Wait," said the old teacher. "Watch." Hyun fell to one knee, blood soaking the front of his fatigues. The Garvik champion stood over him, blade raised for a killing blow. In the alien's eyes was a look of triumph. "Submit, human," growled Dreadbringer. "Accept defeat with honor." Hyun looked up at the massive alien. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. The neural implant was working beyond its design capacity, flooding his system with combat chemicals. "You still don't understand, do you?" said Hyun, his voice surprisingly steady. "Humans don't fear death the way you do. We fear failing those who depend on us." And then, with speed that seemed impossible for someone so wounded, Hyun drove his knife upward, finding the gap between the chest plates of the Garvik's armor. The blade sank deep into the alien's body. Dreadbringer staggered backward, green blood flowing freely from the wound. His eyes were wide with shock, not just from the injury, but from the fact that the human had moved at all. "Heart rate 205, said Minji, her voice tight with worry. "He can't sustain this." On the arena floor, Hyun rose to his feet. Blood loss was making him dizzy, but the implant kept him focused, converting every sensation of fear and pain into pure combat awareness. The wounded Garvik champion charged again, but his movements were slower now, less coordinated. Hyun sidestepped, using the alien's momentum against him. As Dreadbringer passed, Hyun struck again, this time at the back of the knee joint where the scales were thinnest. With a roar of pain, the massive alien crashed to the ground. His blade skittered away across the floor. The chamber was completely silent as Hyun walked to where the fallen champion lay. Dreadbringer looked up at the human standing over him, blood-covered but still standing. For the first time in his life, the Garvik champion felt something new, respect mixed with fear. Hyun placed his knife against the Garvik's throat. One push would end the combat with a kill. "Finish it," growled Dreadbringer. Instead, Hyun stepped back and sheathed his knife. "That's not how humans win," he said. Then he did something that shocked everyone. He extended his hand to help the fallen Garvik up. Confusion crossed the alien's face. Then, slowly, he reached up and took the offered hand. As Hyun pulled Dreadbringer to his feet, the human champion finally allowed himself to feel the full extent of his injuries. His vision darkened at the edges. On Minji's monitor, his heart rate began to fall rapidly as the implant reached its limits. "The human champion is victorious," announced High Commander Crag, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. "Earth's sovereignty is recognized by the Garvik Imperium." It was the last thing Hyun heard before he collapsed. Hyun opened his eyes to the soft beeping of medical equipment. The ceiling above him was white and clean. He was back on Luna Base's medical facility. He tried to sit up but felt a sharp pain across his chest. "Stay still," said Dr. Minji, appearing at his side. "Your body has been through enough." "How long was I out?" asked Hyun, his voice rough. 3 days, said Minji. She checked the monitors beside his bed. "Your heart nearly gave out after the fight. The implant pushed your system beyond safe limits." Hyun's hand went to the back of his neck, feeling for the small device. "I removed it," said Minji. "It did its job, but the human body isn't meant to sustain that level of stress for so long." The door opened, and Captain Taejo entered with Ambassador Ju. Both looked tired but relieved to see Hyun awake. "Our hero returns," said Taejo with a small smile. Hyun shook his head slightly. "What happened after I collapsed? Did the Garvik honor the agreement?" Ju stepped forward. "Yes, and more. High Commander Crag has requested a full alliance with Earth. It seems your victory changed their entire perspective on humans." "The victory, or how I won?" asked Hyun. "Both," said Taejo. "The recording of your fight has been sent to every Earth military base. The way you fought, and especially your decision not to kill Dreadbringer, made quite an impression." Hyun looked down at his bandaged chest. "How is he?" "The Garvik champion." "Recovering like you," said Ju. "He asked to speak with you when you're well enough." Hyun raised an eyebrow in surprise. "What does he want?" "To understand," said Ju. "They all want to understand. The Garvik built their entire civilization around the use of fear as a weapon and a control mechanism. You showed them another way to relate to fear." Minji checked Hyun's vitals again. "You need rest. The Garvik can wait another day." "No," said Hyun, pushing himself up despite the pain. "This is too important. If they want to talk, I should be there." Taejo and Minji exchanged concerned looks, but they knew better than to argue. The meeting room was smaller than the one used for first contact. A round table sat in the center with chairs for both human and Garvik physiology. When Hyun entered, supported by Taejo, High Commander Crag rose to his feet. Beside him sat Dreadbringer, his chest wrapped in some kind of green healing material. "Commander Park," said Crag with a small bow of his head, a human gesture he had clearly practiced. "We are pleased to see you recovered." Hyun nodded in return and took his seat. Ambassador Juwoo sat on his left, while Dr. Minji and Captain Taejo took places behind him. "I understand you have questions," said Hyun. Dreadbringer leaned forward slightly. "You could have killed me. By our laws, it was your right. Why didn't you?" Hyun met the alien's gaze steadily. "Because taking a life should always be the last option, not the first. Winning doesn't always mean the other must lose everything." The Garvik champion's head ridges flattened slightly, a sign of deep thought. "This is not how predators think." "Humans evolved as predators too," said Hyun. "But we also evolved cooperation. Sometimes the pack is stronger than the lone hunter." Crag made a clicking sound deep in his throat. "For 17 systems, our way has worked. Species fear us, so they submit. It is efficient. Until you meet someone who doesn't fear you in the way you expect," said Juwoo. "Yes," admitted Crag. "Your species presents a challenge to our understanding." Hyun shifted in his seat, wincing slightly as his wounds protested. "There's something I want to know. After seeing that humans respond differently to fear, why seek alliance? Why not just attack with your full fleet?" The question was direct, perhaps too direct for diplomacy, but Hyun needed to understand. Crag and Dreadbringer exchanged looks. It was the champion who answered. "Because you are different. All species we have encountered before fled from fear or froze. You move toward it. This makes you either the most dangerous beings in the galaxy or its greatest defenders." A silence fell over the room as everyone absorbed these words. "We have received reports," continued Crag, "of another empire expanding from the far reaches of the galaxy. The Skolex Horde. They use technology that turns fear itself into a weapon, not just biological like our pheromones, but mechanical, affecting any thinking being." "And you think humans might be resistant to this weapon?" asked Taejo. "Not resistant," said Crag, "but able to function despite it, able to fight back when others cannot." Juwoo leaned forward. "So this offer of alliance isn't just about respecting our sovereignty. You want our help against a common enemy." "Yes," admitted Crag. "Is that not a strong basis for alliance? Mutual benefit and protection?" Hyun nodded slowly. "It is." He looked at the Garvik champion across from him. "But an alliance means trust. How do we build that after starting as enemies?" Dreadbringer's mouth moved in what might have been an attempt at a smile, a human expression he was trying to learn. "We begin by learning from each other. You have much to teach us about courage. Perhaps we have things to teach you as well." Over the next 3 months, the alliance between humans and the Garvik grew stronger. Captain Taejo was appointed to lead a joint security council with representatives from both species working together to prepare defenses against the rumored Skolex threat. Hyun, once fully recovered, was asked to establish a new training academy on Mars, where both human and Garvik warriors could learn from each other's fighting styles and psychological approaches. Dr. Minji began a fascinating research project with Garvik scientists. They studied how different species processed fear, looking for ways to help those who suffered from extreme anxiety. Her work with the neural implant expanded beyond military applications, helping people with severe anxiety disorders. "The implant doesn't remove fear," she explained to a group of medical students, both human and Garvik. "It just helps redirect it into more productive pathways. Fear itself isn't the enemy. It's how we respond to it." Ambassador Juwoo found herself in the unexpected position of becoming a cultural ambassador between the species. She organized exchanges of art, music, and literature, helping each species understand the other's perspective on the universe. The Garvik poetry about fear is actually quite beautiful. she told Hyun during one of their now regular meetings. They see it as a sacred emotion, worthy of respect. I'm beginning to understand that, said Hyun. They don't fear fear itself, the way humans often do. 6 months after the combat on Mars, long-range sensors detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of the solar system. The Skolex horde, it seemed, had arrived sooner than expected. On the bridge of the Earth-Garvik Joint Command Ship Unity *, Captain Taejo studied the incoming data with High Commander Crag at his side. Their main weapon appears to be some kind of fear-inducing radiation, reported the science officer, a young Garvik female. It affects the amygdala directly, bypassing normal sensory pathways. Standard species would be paralyzed before they could even fight back, said Crag. But we are not standard species anymore, are we? Taejo touched the communication panel. Commander Park, is your team ready? On the screen, Hyun appeared, now wearing a uniform that combined elements of both human and Garvik design. Behind him stood warriors from both species, armed and prepared. Ready, Captain, said Hyun. The Joint Strike Team is equipped with modified versions of Dr. Han's neural technology. We can function even under the Skolex fear field. And the Garvik troops? Asked Crag. Learning quickly, said Hyun. They're adapting to their own version of the implants. But more importantly, they're learning that fear can be faced directly, not just used as a weapon. Dreadbringer stepped into view beside Hyun. The former champion was now Hyun's second-in-command and closest alien friend. We will fight together, he said. Fear-forged, not fear-frozen. On the command deck of the approaching Skolex flagship, the alien commander received puzzling reports. Their fear weapons, which had paralyzed entire civilizations before, were meeting unexpected resistance. Impossible, hissed the commander. No species can function under full fear saturation. But on the screens, the joint Earth-Garvik fleet moved with purpose and coordination, closing in on the Skolex ships. Leading the defense was a small, fast attack craft piloted by a human who had once fought a Garvik champion to a standstill. Ambassador Ju watched from Luna Base as the battle unfolded. She remembered Hyun's words from what seemed so long ago now. Humans don't run from fear. We run toward it. Now it seemed the Garvik were learning to do the same. As the first shots were fired, she whispered words that had become a motto for the new alliance. They thought they knew fear, until they met humanity. And humanity thought it knew courage, until it taught courage to those who had only known fear. The battle for the future of both species had just begun, but for the first time in galactic history, fear itself had something to fear.